Bowel cancer is Australia's forgotten killer, and the media is partly to blame, according to new figures published in the Medical Journal of Australia.
It says the disease is now one of our most common cancers, and yet it receives far less publicity than conditions which affect similar or fewer numbers of people. Joining us now is the founder of the Bowel Cancer Foundation, Professor Graham Newstead. Professor, good morning.
Good morning, Sharon.
So why do you think this is, that there's not a lot of focus on bowel cancer, or not enough focus, as you'd say?
A distasteful subject. In fact, I guess I could say that my aim is to make a dinner table conversation. It's the second most common cancer. It's second to prostate in men, it's second to breast in women, and yet both of those diseases are unpreventable. We can find them early with mammography or rectal examination and PSA, blood test, but we can't prevent them. Whereas with bowel, we actually know that the cancers arise from polyps. If we find the polyps and remove them, we prevent the cancer.
And yet the degree of attention, as you say, on, say, breast cancer is magnificent and not to be knocked.
Absolutely.
But compared to bowel cancer,
yeah,
it's overwhelming.
Definitely. And people hide their heads in the sand about it, particularly men. It's more common in men than in women, although both are very common. And consequently, people haven't spoken about it. The people that speak about it are those who've been affected by it or who have family members that have been affected by it. But people aged 50 are beginning to develop the polyps. The cancers occur maybe 10 years later, and we simply need to make people aware that bowel cancer is common and also that it is actually preventable. Now, it depends on the method of screening that you use as to how preventable it is. The government offer fecal occult blood testing as a program, and to be greatly lauded for that. However, it's offered once only at age 50, 55 or 65, and only as the blood testing in the bowel motion. So if you have a polyp or indeed an early cancer that is not bleeding, you miss it. So it's not ideal, and it needs to be repeated in case that polyp, which was negative for bleeding, grows and is then positive. So there's that aspect. Colonoscopy is clearly the most optimal method of assessing the bowel to find the polyps and remove them, but it's costly, and we need to put instruments or arrangements in place to allow colonoscopy to be offered on a cheaper and more regular basis to people. But for the moment, the government's program is to be supported, but at the same time, it needs to be repeated.
What about self-examination? I mean, obviously, there's not as much self-examination, or next to no self-examination, where a bowel cancer is concerned, whereas with prostate and breast, that is advocated by your GP.
Well, you can certainly do self-examination for breast. For prostate and colon, of course, that would of course, raised eyebrows in the buses and things. It's a bit difficult. So it does need somebody else to get in there and have a look. So, for instance, if we look at this model, a cancer up here or polyps here or anywhere around the bowel require an instrument to go in and find them. If you're looking for a polyp which is not bleeding and you test the bowel motion, then it's going to be negative. If you test the bowel motion for blood coming from a cancer, it may be positive, but isn't it preferable to remove the polyps and prevent the cancer with a simple colonoscopy than to remove the cancer by an operation, and it may or may not be cured depending upon whether it's penetrated the wall or not?
You say it's preventable. Are you only talking about the discovery of, say, the initial polyp and then the cancer?
Yes. We know
what about the diet and exercise?
Yeah, they're all good things, and whenever I discuss this sort of thing in this sort of format, those questions always come up, Lee. But the problem is that in our lifetime, we're not going to change that, and we don't know that diet or all the other factors of that nature make a huge difference. It's genetics and certainly the environment in which our bowel lives, but the two go together. And we know that if you have a first-degree family history of bowel cancer, for example, your diet may be the same as somebody who doesn't have that history. But the problem is that your risk is twice normal. Now, there's a genetic factor there, so certainly those who have a first-degree family history need to be assessed earlier, and probably optimally with colonoscopy. For the average risk person from age 50, maybe fecal occult blood testing, and certainly it's far better than doing nothing. Yep. But something to be considered.
Professor Graham Newstead, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Sharon. Thank you, Lee.